So to go, and what's really important is this word, a minimum of 12 months of practical training. So we're going to go through the various criteria that you need to meet in order to be released. But it is important that if you do not meet these criteria, your internship can be extended beyond 12 months. Okay, so let's just have a look at the scope of practice. Interns have the same scope of practice as pharmacists, however, very important, under the direct supervision of an approved tutor. So make sure that at all times you are working under the supervision of your tutor. Interns in manufacturing or academia must complete 400 hours of supervised practice in an approved meaning, again, this pharmacy is approved for training and needs to be community or institutional or hospital pharmacy. An important thing to note is that tutors always remain responsible for your training. Arrangements must be prior to the period, and the period that you can conduct the 400 hours needs to be periods of at least 5 consecutive days. So, for example, you can work from a Monday to a Friday, or you'd be able to work from a Wednesday to a Sunday. So a minimum period of 5 consecutive days. Remember that you need to keep records at all times, and that the supervising pharmacist must submit the progress report online. Okay, then with regard to cessation of contract, in the event that you are unable to continue your internship with your current tutor and or the current pharmacy, you would then have to submit a cessation of contract. So this means that the contract has been terminated upon mutual agreement between the intern and the tutor. We need for you then to apply. You don't apply for re-registration because you're already registered as an intern. You need to complete a cessation of contract. This is an online application that you can complete when you log into your profile. It is so we require the contract with the new approved tutor. This must be done 7 days prior to the session date. So we need to receive your application 7 days prior to the session, as well as receive proof of payment of the prescribed fee. Session will only be approved once the new premises and tutor have been approved by council. So it's very important that you can't change pharmacies or change premises or change supervision. We need to make sure that the new tutor and intern are also approved for that the new tutor has been has had their application submitted and approved, and that the premises is approved for training. Okay, so right at the beginning I mentioned that it's a minimum of 365 days, and there are 3 key areas that you need to be competent in. The first one is the pre-registration examination. We're going to provide these dates to you, but the pre-registration examination is an exam consisting of 120 questions, and you will have the opportunity to write this in August this year or October. The second component is the CPD portfolio, and then the last component is the progress reports. The progress reports are submitted by your tutor online, and we will show you where you would be able to see whether these have been submitted. And as mentioned, all of this needs to happen within 365 days of supervised practice. It can be extended if you do not meet any of these criteria. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at the examination. The examination is an online open book examination. It will be written remotely, which means that you will have the option to write this at your place of work or at your place of residence. It consists of 120 questions. It is 1 mark per question. There is no negative marking. We have questions from general practice that comprises of approximately 70% of the paper, and then calculations is 30%. The pass mark overall, you need to obtain 50% for the examination. However, a sub-minimum of 60% in calculations is required and 50% in the general questions is required. So you will only be able to pass if you get 60% in calculations, 50% in the general questions. So really important that you note that. Okay. So with regard to the CPD entries, you are required to complete 1 outcome per domain. And specifically in domain 5, you are required to complete 5.6. The assessment results are released 1 month from the submission deadlines. These deadlines will be communicated to you later in the presentation. The results for entries submitted after the deadline will be released in the subsequent submission deadline. Resubmitted entries are all of those that are indicated not yet successful, and you should submit these as soon as possible, as soon as you have made all the corrections that the assessor has asked you to make. But I know that our assessors and moderators today are going to go through this in great detail. Proof of competence is that you must be found competent in 6 Cpd entries. Okay. The progress reports vary according to your sector of registration. An institutional or community pharmacist must submit 7 progress reports. Manufacturing must submit 9 progress reports, as well as the declaration of 400 hours. If you're in academia, there are 3 progress reports, a declaration of 400 hours, as well as an achievement of your master's qualification. So you will only be able to complete your internship once the university has confirmed that you have passed your master's. So this is after you have done your corrections and everything has been submitted, and we have final proof that you will either be graduating or you have already graduated. Okay. Again, proof of competence would be favorable reports from your tutor. Okay. So we would like to bring to attention that applying for community service, so with regard for community service for pharmacists, Pharmacy Council is responsible for the registration of community service pharmacists, whereas the allocation of you to a facility is done by the Department of Health. Therefore, interns need to please make sure that they regularly visit the ICSP website, and the information from ICSP will be posted in terms of when application dates open and when you would be allocated and when you will be notified of this information. Okay. Another important point is that please be aware that ICSP considers the pre-registration examination and Cpd results when placing interns for community service. Therefore, we recommend that you ensure that you meet the requirements as soon as possible. Okay, we will be holding a CSP workshop later in the year, and more information will be provided regarding community service at this workshop. Okay, so as mentioned, you need to submit 6 Cpds and be competent in all 6 Cpds. We have provided here a list of submission dates as well as when this will be released. So all Cpd entries that reach Pharmacy Council by the 25th of February will be released by the 21st of March. Please note that if you submit a Cpd entry after the 25th of February, you would only receive these results on the 25th of April 2022. Okay, so these are the deadlines. Anything that reaches us before the deadline will be then released according to these dates. Anything after the deadline would only be released in the next cycle. Okay. Please note that appeals must be submitted within 1 calendar month after the release of results. There will be no Cpd assessments in the month of December, and entries that are submitted after the 28th, really important date to note that the last date for submission for this year for your Cpds to be marked is the 25th of October 2022. Okay, anything submitted after that date will only be assessed in January and released on the 3rd of February 2023. When your Cpd entries are released, please note that it will take 48 hours for the system to update. Therefore, if your Cpd result is released today, it will take a time before you would be able to book for the pre-registration examination. So you won't be able to receive your results today and book immediately for the exam. The system takes up to 48 hours to update. Okay, we have taken this into consideration in terms of when our bookings open and close for the pre-registration examination. Another important point is that on the submission of the 10th and subsequent Cpds, you would then have to pay a fee, and this fee is published on Council's website. Okay, this year we are going to be holding Cpd Feedback Sessions. There are 2 scheduled dates, the 7th of June and the 8th of June, between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the evening. Please note that these sessions are not compulsory, and if you are competent in your CPDs, you wouldn't need to attend these sessions. So these are really to provide feedback so that you can communicate and ask the questions so that when you resubmit, your next entry will be, hopefully will be successful. Okay, the purpose of these sessions are to respond to the intern CPD queries, to share the assessment experience, and to help guide you on how to improve the quality of your next CPD entry. So these are dates that you need to diarize. Please make sure that you are available on these dates, the 7th of June and the 8th of June. Regarding the examination, the pre-registration examination will be held. So we've got three opportunities to write the examination. However, most of you would only be eligible to write in August and October. So let's have a look. The first practice examination was held on the 20th of January, and the pre-registration examination will be on the 4th and 5th of March. This is a Friday and Saturday. The next practice examination, which I think majority of the interns that are attending today should aim to write, will be the 2nd of June. This is a Thursday. And then your first opportunity to write the examination would then be the 5th and 6th of August. This is a Friday and Saturday. The last practice examination for the year will be held on the 18th of August. And the last examination will be held on 25 and 26 October. This is a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So the practice examination provides the interns with an opportunity to experience the examination conditions and writing of the examination remotely. So therefore, it is compulsory for all interns to participate in the practice examination. You will not be able to book for the pre-registration examination until you have completed the practice examination. The practice examinations are only held on these dates. So very important that you put these dates into your diary. You only have to write the practice examination once, and that's why I said that majority of you would probably be aiming to write the practice examination in June. Okay, please make sure that you do refer to the website as these dates are subject to change. Very important that examination bookings must be done online before the closing date. We will notify you via email and SMS that we have sent out communication and that bookings for the examinations have opened. There is a period after the bookings close in which we will accept late bookings, but late bookings close 14 days before the examination is held, and after that date you will not be able to book for the exam. Okay, all of this information can be found in the 2022 Intern Tutor Manual. So please make sure that you visit the website and download the manual. And we will also be conducting a workshop in the month of May, and all of the information in detail will be provided in that workshop. Okay, so we would like to bring your attention to the entrance exam, the exam entrance requirements. So you need to meet these requirements, and you need to meet these requirements when you are booking for the exam. Okay, very important with regard to the CPD entries. So as I mentioned, most of you would only be eligible to write the examination in August. This is because interns must be in their 6th month of internship. They must have submitted 6 CPD entries and be competent in 3. So you need to have submitted 6, but you need to be competent in 3 of these entries. You also need to have completed the practice examination. Please make sure that your tutor has submitted 3 progress reports. This is the 12-week progress report, as well as the 24-week personal and professional development report, as well as the sectoral experience checklist. So those are important that your tutor must have submitted these. Interns in their 9th month. So these would be interns that registered currently that you might be attending, but you would have registered then at the end of 2021. And please note that the 9-month rule would apply to any of the interns that registered in January, but will be writing the exam in October. So interns that are registered for 9 months or more must have submitted and be competent in all 6 CPDs, and they must have completed the practice exam. Remember, you only have to complete the practice exam once, and your tutor must have submitted 4 progress reports. If you are unsuccessful in the examination and you are reattempting the examination, you need to be competent in all 6 Cpd entries in order to be able to sit for the examination, and your tutor must have submitted the relevant progress report according to the intern's date of registration. There is no exam fee when you attempt the exam for the first and second time. However, a fee will be charged for the third and subsequent attempts. Please note that tutors will have access to the intern's overall results. Okay, so with regard to council decisions, we have covered this in the previous slide, so just to bring your attention to it again. Pharmacist interns attempting the pre-registration examination for the first time will only be allowed to sit for the examination after their first 6 months of internship, submitting at least 6 Cpd entries online and being competent in 3. Their first 3 progress reports must have been submitted. Pharmacist interns registered for 9 months need to have submitted 6 Cpd entries and be competent in 6 Cpd entries, and your tutor must have submitted 4 progress reports. Pharmacist interns attempting the examination for the second time must be competent in all 6 Cpd entries in order to be able to sit for the examination and must have submitted the relevant progress reports. Okay. So if you have a second device with you, so if you're logged in via your computer and you have your phone, please take this opportunity just to type in www.pharmcouncil.co.za, and I'd like you to go to the public pages, and this is what we call the public pages because it's available to everyone. You would then go to the landing page and you would click on Registered Person. Under Registered Person, you would then open up the tab that says Pharmacist Intern. And then under Pharmacist Intern, what you would see is that we've got various tabs below. We've got an overview, scope of practice, internship, manual, Cpd, pre-registration examinations, applications, fees, login, and a search function. So these are all the tabs that are available. Please make sure that you do visit the tab manual and that you are going to download the 2022 Tutor Intern Manual. Once you have looked at the manual, please also familiarize yourself with where you can log into your profile on the SAPC website. And this would require that you then put in your P number, your ID number, as well as your password. Okay, so as mentioned, please make sure that you have downloaded the manual. Don't only download it, but make sure that you have read it from cover to cover. Okay, once you have put in your P number, your ID number, and your password, you would then reach the dashboard. Okay, and we'd like to bring your attention to the various tabs under the dashboard. So if we have a look at the blue plane on the left-hand side, you've got dashboard, annual declaration, CPDs, manuals, as well as my progress, and then lastly, the logouts tab. Then on the dashboard, under dashboard, you've got various blocks that you can open up. Finance, applications, letters and certificates, pre-registration examinations, contact, progress reports, workshops, and telecommunication. Very important that, like earlier we were talking about the session of contract application, you would be able to find this under applications. The letter as well as a certificate confirming that you are an intern and that you're registered with SAPC would be able to be found under letters and certificates. Every email or communication that we send you will be recorded under letters and certificates. Also, once you have booked for the pre-registration examination, you will receive booking confirmation, and you would be able to find this under letters and certificates. Under the pre-registration examination, this is where you will book to write the examination. And the other important tab is the progress reports. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with workshops, as you would have used this to book for today. And then the last one is telecommunications. Okay, so then moving down on the blue plane, the next one is annual declaration. So if you click on annual declaration, you won't be able to continue with any of your CPDs until you have completed the annual declaration. So you would click on go to annual declaration, and this is where you declare which sector of pharmacy you are practicing in. And this would be the same for all people that are completing CPDs, pharmacists as well. However, even after you have completed this, interns are still required to complete CPD entries across all 6 domains. Okay. You would have to then click on New Declaration, and for every year you need to complete your annual declaration. Okay, you would then have a look, and you would need to provide your employment information, your domain competencies, as well as the assessment criteria. So you'd have to follow this and make sure that you are entering in the various bits of information that are required. But as mentioned, you are still required to complete entries across all 6 domains. Okay. So once you have completed it, it will bring up a tab that says, according to your competencies, you are a practicing pharmacist, and then you would have to click on agree. Okay. Once that is completed, you would then be able to go onto the CPD, into the Cpd cycle and submit your first entries. Okay, so this provides just an overview of the various steps involved: step 1, reflection; step 2, planning; step 3, implementation; and then the last step, evaluation, and provides an overview of what is expected in each step. These are the domains and competencies. The domains, we have 6 domains: public health, safe and rational use of medicines and medical devices, supply of medicines and medical devices, organization and management skills, professional and personal practice, as well as education, research, and critical analysis. An intern is required to submit 6 CPDs, 1 per domain. The CPD cycle starts with reflection, and the first thing that you need to do is to identify a learning need. You would then be taken through the various steps in which you would be required to submit information. You would, and I know that this is going to be explained in detail further on. You will be required to identify a title, as well as complete the various parameters in order to proceed onto the next step of the CPD cycle. Okay, so you would move from reflection to planning, implementation, evaluation, and then you would submit. Okay, so having a look at the dashboard pages, we've already gone through this, but just to highlight a few things from these pages. Everything that we send you, all communication, all your results are always found on the dashboard. Okay. Closer to the examination time, we will be asking you to book for the exam. You'll have to book for the practice examination, and you would use the pre-registration examinations block. Once you open that up, then you will then see that it gives you the opportunity to click on examination bookings. Workshops, in order to book for the workshops, and today you would have used this booking function. You would have then clicked on workshops, and all the available workshops will be listed there. Okay, as mentioned, the examination bookings, the examination results, the practice examinations are all found under the tab examinations. The examination, when you write the examination, we will send you a link which will take you to a site in order to write, and that's where you will write the examination. So the examination isn't accessed on this page. It will be accessed through the link that we will provide to interns. Okay, regarding your progress reports, so this is an example of someone in a community pharmacy. They have 7 progress reports, and as you submit your progress result, your progress reports, you will see that the status will then change from incomplete to submitted. So here you will be able to check that your tutor has submitted your progress report. So please make sure that you have, and that your tutor submits progress reports at regular intervals, so that when it comes to booking for the examination, you will meet the criteria. Okay. So please note that at the end of the year, you will not be released until we have received all of your progress reports. And that is something that could delay your release to community service. Okay, the last page or the last tab on the navigating bar on the left-hand side is My Progress. And My Progress really gives you a snapshot of where you are in terms of meeting the criteria. So, for example, it records the progress reports and how many have been submitted. On this page, you will also be able to see your practical training days. And remember, this would reach 365. And if you've met all other criteria, you will be released. Here, you will also see your examination results as well as your CPD results. So this really is just to help you and guide you in terms of which criteria you have met. Okay, so just to make sure that you have met all areas in terms of progress reports, practical training, the exam, and CPDs. Okay, so please note that the annual fees for interns that is payable by the 1st of June each year is 616 Rand. This includes VAT. Internship must be completed within 12 months. Your employment contract at most facilities is for 1 year, and employers are not always able to reserve your intern position for a period longer than the contract. So therefore, what we have been finding is that interns that have not met the criteria for internship would have to find another internship position if they do not meet the criteria after 365 days. So make sure that you're working with your tutor to ensure that you meet these criteria. If you have not completed your internship within 12 months, you must extend the contract with the same tutor, or you need to get another tutor. And make sure that if you have not met the criteria, you need to attend the workshop for the following year to ensure that any information that has changed, you have heard about it and that you are preparing accordingly. Okay. Intern Progress is made available to the intern, the employer, the tutor, as well as National Department of Health. So they are aware in terms of how many CPDs you have submitted, how many you are competent in, your exam results, etc. And that's important because they have a vested interest in your progress as an intern. So what could perhaps delay your release from internship? The first thing is submitting Cpd entries after the October submission deadline. And remember that we showed you all of the submission and release dates. And it's important that you have these somewhere that you can see them and that you're aware of these dates to make sure that you are submitting your Cpd entries so that you can meet the criteria to write the exam at the first available opportunity. If you're not competent in 6 out of the 6 Cpd entries, if you have failed the pre-registration examination or you haven't written the pre-registration examination, incomplete progress reports, or not having completed 365 days of practical training. So that's really important that you make sure that these delays do not affect you. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the questions that we frequently have been asked. Okay, can my CPDs be marked as my ComServe placement once evidence that I have completed before I get my appointment letter? So this is not possible. Your CPD results are marked and released according to the dates that we have provided, and these will not be changing in 2022. Make sure that you have met these dates in order for you to receive your release letter so that you can provide this information to ICSP. Okay, another question. I hope this finds you well. I am writing to find out when the next CPD results will be released, as I submitted last year, and I'm worried that this may stop me from getting released from community service if I do not get my results soon. Okay, so remember that especially over the December break, the month of December, we do not assess CPDs. And you must make sure, please, that you have submitted your CPD by October in order for your CPD to be released in November. The assessors and moderators are not available over December, and therefore the next the next submission date and release date would be in January 2023 to be released in February 2023. So make sure that you have met these dates. Is there no way that I can please request an exemption for me, seeing as though I'm desperate to start and would be without a job for more than a month? Please make sure that you have met the criteria, and therefore you won't have the dilemma of being without an income for a period of a month. Please make sure that you do contact us, however, because if it is the examination that you need to write, and this has delayed your starting of your community service year, there are specific applications that you can submit which would allow you to work within the category of a post-basic assessment, a post-basic assistant, in order for you then to still earn an income while waiting to write the exam. But that is only applicable to interns that have met the CPD requirements and are just waiting to write the examination. The last question, can my outstanding CPDs be marked faster in order for me to keep my position for community service? Again, the CPDs will be released according to the release dates that we have provided, and unfortunately there can be no exceptions to these rules. Okay. With regard to unprofessional conduct, please note that you cannot contact your assessor or moderator and pressurize them to mark your CPD entries. Contact with assessors is facilitated by the Office of the Registrar when necessary. So you may request that your assessor contacts you, or that you would be able to have communication with your assessor, but this is facilitated by the Office of the Registrar, and you may not contact the assessor or moderator directly. You may not threaten the assessor or moderator for marking of CPD entries. Any unprofessional behavior will result in disciplinary action being taken against the intern. So please make sure that you do not contact the assessor or moderator unless this has been facilitated through the Office of the Registrar. Okay, contacting the SAPC, please make sure that you are aware of the various platforms that you can communicate with SAPC. Please note that you can contact the customer care. You can call us or send an email. The information is available on our website. You can also send an email to interns@sapc.za.org. Please also note that there is a function for you to contact the various departments directly through the submit a request function. You would then be able to select CPD, or for example, if it is a query about the examination, you could then click on pre-registration. You would type in your details. Very important that we have a P number as well as your cell phone number so that we can contact you and you can provide us with a comment. Okay, so at this point, I just want to confirm with Tabang if we'll be taking questions or if these will be taken at the end.
Okay, thank you, Deanne. Thank you so much for the presentation. We can take questions that are related to what you were presenting now. Natalie, may you please facilitate it from your side? Thank you.
Thank you, Tabang.
So if you have any questions, please make sure that you're typing them in the chat function. We will then be able to see the questions on our side. We will read out the questions and then answer the questions accordingly. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, type in your question and then post your question. We will read it out and respond to it.
Colleagues, just be patient with us. We're still waiting for the questions to be uploaded. So just give us a second, please. Thank you.
Okay, we have our first question. Are there specific dates which the tutor must submit the report?
Thanks, Natalie. So there are specific time points in which we request that the tutor submits the progress reports, but they can submit it at any stage. So we do say that it's 12 weeks or 24 weeks or 36 weeks, and it's approximately around this time that the tutor needs to submit the progress reports. However, an intern will not be allowed to book for the exam unless the tutor has submitted it upon the intern booking for the exam. So it's very important that these reports are submitted before the intern tries to book for the exam.
Are we still having more questions, Natalie, or should we move on to the next presentation?
I think we can move on. We'll answer all questions at the end.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, now we're going to move on to the second part of our workshop, and Dr. Rianda Jubet, she will be taking us through together with Prof. Nadine Butler. Thank you. Over to you, Rianda.
Thank you very much, Devon. Good morning, everyone. Prof. Nadine, you can share your screen with us, then we can go from there.
Rianda,
Okay.
are you okay?
Yes, I just can't see the screen, so I will share mine if it's all right.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe share yours. Prof will share from his side when it's her turn. Thank you.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can see. May you please just put it on slideshow.
Like this?
Slideshow at the bottom there. Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, yes, that is Prof. Nadine that is sharing. So, okay, so here we go. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Rianda Jubet. So me and Prof. Nadine Butler, we are both moderators of Cpd Entries for interns, and we will just go through the Cpd process and what it is and what you're supposed to submit. Prof, I need control. Okay, there we go. So firstly, we will just quickly talk about the competency standards. How to select a domain. Then we will talk about the Cpd, the whole cycle, the evidence. Prof. Nadine will help us with an example. Then we're going to look at assessment, professionalism, confidentiality. We've got to highlight the challenging competency standards and then also look at the role of the tutor. I think we should just put it back to presentation mode, please, Prof. Okay, the next slide, please. So firstly, the important resources that you will need to have at hand when completing your CPDs is your intern and tutor manual. Ms. Johnson have showed you all now in the previous presentation how to download it if you have not yet done it. But that is the most important resource that you will need this year. And within this manual, pages 33 to 35, you will find the criteria for the assessment of a CPD entry. So you will see there what the assessors look at when they're assessing your CPD. There's also a checklist for the CPD portfolio, which is on pages 38 to 40. I will also refer to that checklist while we go through the different steps. And that is also very handy to make sure that you have included everything. And then the competency standards for pharmacists, which is page 60 to 83 or Annex B. Then also important, your tutor is also your resource, one of your resources. Most tutors have a lot of experience and they can help you and guide you throughout this process. And then also the SAPC website. It's important to note for the tutors that the manual is also aimed at the tutor. Don't just leave it to the intern. Make sure that you are also familiar with the content thereof. Okay, so let's look firstly at a competency framework. And I want you, if you have your manual, to familiarize yourself with Annex B, which is the competency standards for CPDs. So the CPD portfolio for interns is based on the 2018 competency standards for pharmacists in South Africa. And it describes what newly qualified pharmacists must be capable of at entry level in order to practice within your scope and to meet the patient's needs. So as I've said, it is provided in Annex B. We can move on. You will see that there's new terminology that you will now meet. First one is domain. So the competency standards is structured according to domains. Within it, there's a competency standard, and they all have behavioral statements as well. So if we look at domains, there are 6 domains. You will see it's public health, safe and rational use of medicines and medical devices, supply of medicines and medical devices, organizational and management skills, professional and personal practice, and then lastly, education, critical analysis, and research. Now, all of these domains are organized clusters of competencies. So they are grouped together, the competencies. You will see here on top we have the domain. Underneath the domain, we have the different competency standards, and underneath the competency standards, we have the behavioral statements. We will look into more detail into how they are structured. We can move on. So here's an example. This one is for domain 1. Domain 1 is public health. And these 6 competency standards within domain 1, they are from 1.1 all the way through to 1.6. So competency standard 1.1, you will see is the promotion of health and wellness. And underneath, you will see there's 4 behavioral statements. It's that A, B, C, and D. A, which is provide advice on health promotion, and B is advice on disease prevention. C, provide advice on healthy lifestyles, and then D, participate in public health campaigns. So each of these competency standards have the different behavioral statements. Some of them have only 1 or 2. There's other competency standards that have up to 9 behavioral statements. So the competency standards is part of a domain. Then there's a section on how does the domain apply to you. Then there's a short introduction. The competencies are listed and they are numbered. Then each of them have the behavioral statements. You as an intern is an entry-level pharmacist, and it's usually for your first 3 years of practice, you will be an entry-level pharmacist. Between 3 and 7 years, you're an intermediate practice pharmacist, and then from 7 years onwards, you have advanced practice. And all pharmacists need to do CPDs, not only interns. And then at the bottom, there's an assessment or tick box, which will indicate if the standard form part of your current practice of pharmacy. So it's important that you look at where you are currently working. So as I've said, entry level is for interns, intermediate and advanced is later in your career. So if we look at Competency Standard 2.6, it is part of Domain 2. And Domain 2, as we've said, is safe and rational use of medicines and medical devices. So there you see the competency title 2.6, Pharmacist Initiated Therapy. And the second arrow refers to the behavioral statements, A through to D. And then at the bottom is the assessment where you tick the appropriate box. Does this standard form part of my current practice of pharmacy? If, for example, one day you decide to go into manufacturing and that's the only thing that you do, then obviously you will not really do pharmacist-initiated therapy. Okay, if we look at another example, here you will see it's Domain 1, Public Health, and there at the top, does this domain apply to me? So that's that first part. It tells you that it is applicable to all pharmacists whose practice includes promotion of health and wellness. And then it's through the provision of healthcare information and education to the public and other members of the healthcare team. If you read through this first, does this domain apply to me? In every domain, you will see that it is applicable to all pharmacists and all interns. Then the introduction part is very important. Don't just keep that or go over it. Really read through that because that gives you a background on what the domain is about. Then there's the competencies. You'll see there in that right-hand side block, 1 through to 6. And then at the bottom, the behavioral statements. And this is the behavioral statements for Competency Standard 1.1, which is promotion of health and wellness. So this is the structure of how the competency standards look like. So let's move on to CPD or continuing professional development. So firstly, it's important to remember that it is a cyclical activity. So you will think or you will come across something that you don't know and that you want to learn to do. And at the end of the cycle, you might have noticed something else that's unclear to you or something else that triggered you. And that's why it's called a cyclical activity. So CPD is the process by which registered persons, in other words, pharmacists as well, maintain and enhance their competence throughout their professional career. It encompasses a range of activities and it is usually it's a cycle because it's cyclical. So we have 4 phases. We have the reflection phase, the planning, the implementation, and then the evaluation. We usually start at the reflection. And important that you have to complete all four of these phases or steps in the cycle before you can submit your CPD. So then the first step is the reflection, and here you will ask, what do I need to know, or what do I need to learn to do? So when you start with the reflection, you will then decide on an appropriate learning title. This title should be relevant to what you want to learn. It is the same if you want to take a book from the bookshelf and you read the title, you know what you're going to get in there. If you decide to do 3.5, which is about compounding, and your title is just compounding, then it doesn't really say what you want to learn. And please do not copy the wording of the competency standard. So if you select 1.1, don't make your title promotion of health and wellness because it's not unique and it doesn't describe your case study. So your learning title must be unique to what you want to learn. Okay. If we move on, here in the reflection, you will ask yourself, what do I need to learn? So it's important that it is your own learning need. And how do I know that this is what I need to learn? What happened that made me realize I need to learn something new? And what will I do with what I've learned? How will I apply it? How will it change my scope of practice or the way I act? So make it personal. Use I. Remember, CPDs is about yourself. I always say to the fourth year students that there's no memorandum for CPDs because it's unique to each and every person. Be careful that you do not describe the learning need of the patient or the pharmacist assistant. If you want to do patient consultation, and it's for example, you want to consult a patient on the use of an asthma inhaler, your learning needs should relate to what you want to know about consultation, not that the patient didn't know about the inhaler. So make sure that it is your learning need and it must be related to the selected outcome. Don't select, for example, pharmacist-initiated therapy, and then you start with you receive the prescription and you go and everything is about the prescription. So it must be related to the outcome that you have selected. Your reflection and if you ask yourself what you need to learn will also help you to determine the choice of the competency standards and the behavioral statements that you will address. As I've said previously, there's a checklist that you can use. It's on page 38 to 40. So you can use this checklist just to go through and make sure that you have covered everything in your reflection. The second step is the planning. And here we want to know, how can I learn this? So it's important here that you use the behavioral statements to guide you while you structure your planning, because in the end, the behavioral statement is what you need to provide evidence for. So use the behavioral statements in your planning. So you have to explain exactly how you are going to learn this and what your options are. Don't only describe how you plan to proceed. So don't just say if you want to do extemporaneous mixture that you're going to collect all the ingredients, make sure the area is clean, get the apparatus ready. That is not what we want to know, how you plan to proceed, but what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Why are you going to do it? And when are you going to do it? So refer to the behavioral statements, structure your planning accordingly, mention the resources that you will use, but be specific with the resources. If you want to do compounding and you say you're going to use the GPP, then say I'm going to use the GPP section 2.18 because, and then you must elaborate on that. But in short, so mention the resources and be specific with them. And then also think on what evidence you can submit to support your learning activity. Important that the planning is written in future tense because it is a planning. And then in the planning section, you should also select the primary learning trigger and the activity. The primary learning trigger, is it your tutor that asked you something or told you something? Was it a patient that requested some information? Was it one of your fellow interns? You were having a discussion and they said something that triggered the learning need. And then the activity, how will you do this? Or how will you achieve this? Will you attend a meeting? Will you read journal articles? So there's different activities that you can select. Again, back to the checklist, make sure that you go through there. And if you can tick yes to all of these questions, then you know that your planning will probably be successful. The third step is the implementation, and this is completing the activity. Here you will say what you have done. You will explain that to us. So you will describe what you actually did. You will provide the context in which you did it. Important, you will link it to the evidence. And remember, you should include all the behavioral statements of the chosen outcome and address them in your implementation. If it was pharmacist-initiated therapy and you didn't need to refer the patient because you were able to help or treat the patient successfully, then you need to acknowledge that in your implementation. And your implementation is written in the past tense because you have done it now. So you did, or I did. Again, tell the story and keep it personal. Use I. Remember, your whole CPD must be like a story, and especially the implementation, because we want to know what you did. And remember, the assessor and the moderator is not there in the pharmacy with you. We can see what you did, so therefore you have to tell it to us in your implementation and then also your evidence. In the implementation step, you will also upload your evidence, but we will talk about the evidence a little bit later, more in detail. Again, the checklist. Have I described what I did, where, when, what, and how? Is it past tense? Have I referred to the labels of my evidence? Have I checked that it matches my learning need? Sometimes it happens that an intern starts with a learning need, and then you get sidetracked and you end up that it doesn't match your learning need anymore. So make sure that your learning need it matches in the implementation. And then lastly, did I check that I address all the behavioral statements? Very important, your implementation must be supported by evidence. So here's the checklist for the evidence. They go hand in hand. We will talk about the evidence in detail, and you will understand what we mean with sufficient and annotated and clear and current. Then the last step, or the fourth step, is the evaluation. And here you will ask, what have I learned and how have I applied my learning? So the focus in the evaluation is the outcome. What have you learned? And that should be related to the evidence that you've provided. The application is how you have used the acquired knowledge that you gained. And remember that you need to provide an example of how you have applied what you have learned. If you have selected 2.6, pharmacist-initiated therapy, and your whole activity was built around a patient that entered your pharmacy and asked for medication for flu, then your application should not be the following day, another patient came with flu. It can be something else, because remember, it should be about the competency standard and what you have learned about pharmacist-initiated therapy. If it was policy development, 4.6, and you use the SOP for procurement, then your application should be the tutor said that you are going to do stock take, and you were able to access the stock take SOP and to follow the relevant steps and apply it. So it's important that you apply, because then we know you have actually mastered this problem that you had. You are able to apply it. And then also, what was the impact? How has your acquired knowledge changed your practice? And then also identification of a further learning need. Remember, important, you should not write here what you did. That was reflection. Here is you evaluate what you have learned. As I've said, you need to provide examples of application. No evidence needed there. And then again, the checklist for the evaluation. Have I stated what I learned? Remember, not what I did, what I learned. Have I checked that my learning matches my learning need and it's relevant? Have I described what was the impact? And have I given a specific example? Remember, I don't have to provide evidence for this. And have I clearly noted my future learning needs? This is the part where most interns fell short, is the application and also the future learning need. So it's important that you address that as well. Okay, so that is the the 4 steps in the CPD cycle. And remember, very important, you have to complete every cycle, each phase of the cycle must be completed for every CPD entry that you make. If you go onto the website and you want to submit, you can stop at certain phases, but you will have to complete it in the end. So it is a stepwise approach that we follow to complete the CPD entries. It is important that you first need to do your annual declaration. You won't be able to start doing a CPD if your annual declaration is not done. So if you have not done it for this year, then please do it as soon as possible. The same goes for pharmacists, and you have to do your annual declaration every year. It's an annual declaration, so you have to do it every year. Then you will select the domain. You will select the competency standard from the domain, read through all the behavioral statements of the selected competency standard. Then you start with the cycle. You enter and submit your CPD online for tutor verification. Make very sure that your tutor is aware that you have submitted online so that they can verify your entry. Then your tutor verifies and submit it online, and then you need to check for feedback. Please, tutors, really read through what the intern have written. Don't just go through the motions of accepting and then it's not successful. If you want to save time, you can go through the entry before the intern start to submit it online. But it is important that you read through what the intern have written there. So the domain should focus on, the focus should be relevant to your practice setting. Remember, the cycle have 4 steps, and don't submit for tutor verification on the day of the deadline. Make sure you do it in advance. You have the deadlines. It is in the manual. Ms. Johnson have also highlighted it for you and spoke about the deadlines. It's page 31 in your manual. Make sure that you are in time, and give your tutors some time as well. Tutors are busy and they don't wait for interns to submit CPDs. So make sure that it is submitted before the deadlines. So once you have chosen a competency standard, check that it is appropriate for your practice setting. Don't select 2.8, which is clinical trials, if you are not actively involved in a clinical trial and work in a setting where that happens. If you only work in retail, then it is obviously not appropriate. So make sure it's appropriate. Read all the behavioral statements. Decide on the evidence that you want to submit. We will talk about the 75% when we get to evidence, and then follow through. As you complete each phase of the CPD cycle, make sure that what you write is relevant to the outcome that you have selected, and refer to the checklist. That is very important. That is why we gave it to you and why it is in the manual, so that you can use that. So the requirements for CPDs, as Ms. Johnson also said, you need to submit 6 CPD entries, 1 from each domain, and you must be successful in all 6 of those entries, and each entry must be accompanied by suitable evidence. So you need to choose 1 competency standard from each domain, read their behavioral statements. If there is 1, 2, or 3 behavioral statements, then you need to provide evidence for all 3 of them, or both of them, or if there's only the 1 behavioral statement. If there's more than 4 and more, then only at least 75% of them need evidence. And important, consult your manual for the details of the behavioral statement. Very important, very, very important, every CPD must reflect your individual work, your own work, no group activities. Don't get into the trap of pharmacy week, and we are 4 interns in this hospital, and we had to do the activities for pharmacy week, and now you submit that. Make sure that it is your own work, your individual work, no group activities. Okay, so let's just look. We have domain 1, public health. This is just to show you the requirements regarding the evidence. You will see we have the 1.1 and competency standard 1.3. 1.3 is professional and health advocacy, and there's only 2 behavioral statements, A, B, and then the competency standard 1.1, which is promotion of health and wellness. Again, there's 4 behavioral statements. So if you select 1.3, you will have to provide evidence for both A and B, which is participating as a pharmacist within a healthcare team and applying health policy and procedures in practice. So you will have to show us that you can act or work in that way. So you will have to provide evidence for both of them. If you select 1.1, there's 4, then at least 3 of the 4 need to have evidence. But we always say rather aim to provide evidence for all 4, because it might just happen that you think your evidence is sufficient and then the assessor or the moderator sees something that is wrong there, or that it's not relevant, or that it doesn't really address a behavioral statement, and then your evidence is insufficient. But if there's more than 4 or more, then only 75% of them you need to provide evidence for. Okay, so now we're going to look at the evidence and the criteria for the evidence. So your evidence needs to be annotated, current, valid, authentic, and sufficient. It needs to be, we're going to look at all 5 of them, and it must meet all 5 of these criteria. So firstly, we're going to start with annotated. So what is annotate? What is it to annotate your evidence? It gives meaning to the evidence, and it justifies why you have included it. Remember, as I said previously, we are not there. You cannot see what you did, so you will have to show with your evidence, and you have to annotate. You have to describe why is it there. It must be meaningful, and it must provide links to the behavioral statements. Very important, it tells us the story, and the story is, what have I done to show my behavior? It is not just a label or a single word next to pieces or parts of the evidence. It's not scribble, and important, if it's lacking links to behavioral statement, then it's not annotated. We will now look at how does annotation look like, what is good annotation. Here we have 2 dates. On the left-hand side, we have the meaningful annotation, and on the right-hand side, no value. If you just say, this is the date of the prescription, it doesn't mean anything. Why is it important? On the left-hand side, there's the explanation. For a prescription to be valid, it must be presented for dispensing within 1 month after it was written. This prescription is thus valid. So that is the reason why the date on the prescription is important. So for every piece of important information or something that you looked at in your evidence, you need to describe by means of an annotation why it is important for you or why you included it. Let's look at this tax invoice. As it is here, it's not really relevant. It doesn't tell us anything. I don't know why you have included it, so how should we annotate this invoice? Firstly, here we can see this interns wrote at the top, it's an invoice, the name of the pharmacy with the arrow to there, the date was indicated, the medicine that was ordered. There you circled the batch number and also indicated the account number. But this still does not tell me anything. It doesn't tell me why is the account number important on this evidence. It's also not clear for which competency standard or which competency standards behavioral statement this invoice is evidence for. If we go further, this one looks a bit better. It's typed. You are in the privilege. You are privileged enough to have technology. You can type onto scanned documents. When me and Prof. Butler started with CPD assessments way back, we received boxes full of files from Council's office. So hard copies were submitted for CPDs. You are privileged to have technology that you can use. So this looks a bit better, but it still doesn't tell me why is the batch number important. Why the expiry date? So what? This is what we will say if we look at this and we must assess it. So what? You know the name, you can identify the batch number, the invoice, expiry date, and at the bottom, this intern wrote the medicine was stored after it was received. Okay. Now it gets a bit better. There at the top right, we have CS 3.2E, the end phase of the procurement of medicine. Then at the left top, I check the name of the pharmacy on the parcel to confirm that it is indeed for my pharmacy. So that is why that was important for this intern. Here in the middle, I check the medicine name, strength, pack size, and price. So that is why that's highlighted. The batch number. And then he explained, I compared the batch number with the batch number on the parcel and to ensure that it's the same. And this is important for batch traceability. The expiry date, the same, the explanation there. I checked the expiry date to confirm that it is not short-dated. And then I used the expiry date to pack the medicine on the shelf according to the FIFO principle. And then at the bottom, the declaration that it was received in good order. One of the aspects that you need to look at in 3.2 is damaged or short-dated stock. And in this case, there was no damaged or short-dated stock. So the intern acknowledged that the medicine was not damaged or short-dated. The medicine was captured onto the system to update the levels, and then it was stored on the shelf below 25 degrees Celsius in alphabetical order with the other Schedule 5 medicines as per the SOP. So there's a good explanation of what happened. So you can see the quality of the annotation on this slide is much better than the first two, where it was either handwritten, only with arrows, no explanation why it is there. So this is a clear, now I know that, okay, this intern knows what to do with an invoice. You know what to check. You know why it is important that there's a batch number and an expiry date. Okay, so that's annotations. If we move on, your evidence should also be current. It means it must relate to the exposure during your internship period. It must therefore be collected during this year, 2022. Don't include anything from undergraduate years. If you did a research project in your fourth year and you get to domain 6, where one of the competency standards relate to research, do not provide that project for your CPD for this year, because then it's not current, then it's past. Then the evidence must be valid, so it must pertain to the specific competency that's being addressed. If you do pharmacist-initiated therapy and all your evidence is around a prescription and if it's valid and how you provided advice, then it is not valid. And if your evidence is not valid, then the other 4 criteria does not count. And if you make calculation errors or you have factual errors on your evidence, then it is also deemed not valid. So make sure if you do a calculation that it is correct. Make sure that it pertains to what you have selected to do or what you want to show us that you can do. So validity is the most important. Here's an example. If the competence is about how to fry an egg, the evidence is about the crispiness of the bacon, then it is of no value. We will say it's not valid, and if it's not valid, it doesn't matter if it's sufficient, properly annotated, current, or authentic. We will not be successful. Then authentic. Authentic means that it is your own work. The evidence must be verified by your tutor, online by your tutor. Make sure that your tutor verifies your entries. and make it your own responsibility to check. Remember, it is your internship. It is not your tutor's internship. It's yours. So make sure that your tutor have verified your entries. For academic interns and interns in manufacturing, it is important that the RP or the supervising pharmacist, where you do your 400 hours, need to sign your evidence, physically on your evidence, and then your tutor also have to verify that evidence. And if the pharmacist, if the RP or the supervising pharmacist sign your evidence, make sure that it is that we know who that person is, the designation, their P number, and the date as well. Sufficient. We have spoke about sufficiency a bit. So if there's 4 or more behavioral statements, then the evidence submitted must cover at least 75% of them. Make sure you have enough evidence, and as I've said, focus on the quality and not only on the quantity of the evidence. You can submit a 60-page document full of evidence and it still can be not sufficient. So make sure of the quality. And important that you should not use the same piece of evidence for more than one competency standard. So if you can use a prescription, but different prescriptions for different competency standards. But if you have one Schedule 6 prescription for patient A, you cannot use that prescription for patient A for more than one competency standard. There's more than enough opportunities and cases that happen in the pharmacy that you can get enough evidence. So you are allowed to use photos as evidence, but add a date stamp to it. Again, a photo is meaningless unless it's authenticated. And if it's a photo of you, you need to identify yourself. Otherwise, it can be anyone in the photo. And very important, you need to maintain patient confidentiality with the photos as well. Don't think because everybody wears a face mask that it is enough. It is not enough. You still need to maintain patient confidentiality. If you use the SAMF or the MIMS, for example, it is important to put the name of the reference on that page or pages that you use, as well as the edition. And what does it show? If you just scan a page of the SAMF and upload it and think it's evidence and I don't know why, then it's meaningless. So it should not just show me that you can use a scanner. That's where the annotation comes in. If you want to use an article or a page from the SAMF, make sure that it is clear what information on that page you used and why you used that. Same with delivery notes. What does it show? Stock was delivered. Okay. Who received it? So if you signed for the stock, then annotate that we know that that is your signature. I said it before, put yourself in the assessor's shoes before you submit your evidence. Or you can give your CPD and your evidence to someone that does not know what you did, and your parents or a friend or a colleague, and if it's clear to them by only looking at what you've written in all 4 steps and your evidence, they can tell you what you did, and they know then it would probably be enough. But if you need to ask yourself, what does this show? If that person asks you, but why is this here? Then it will probably need more discussion or better annotation. If you do make use of photos, make sure that it is not glossy. Please do not upload your evidence. Yes, we all know there's a rotate button in PDF, but it is not professional if evidence is uploaded upside down. Your evidence must be clear and legible. In other words, if you use, for example, a patient information leaflet and you scan it in and then you print it out and you write on it and then you scan it in, then sometimes it becomes very unclear and not easy to read. And we can't assess something that we can't read. And make sure that your evidence is in one document. Not only because it makes it easier for the assessor, but it also helps you to make sure that you have not missed a document. If you have to submit 10 documents instead of just one, it's easy to miss some of your evidence. And then it also helps you to make sure that it is in the correct order. Because if you have 10 documents and you refer in your text to document 1 as being the prescription, and I open document 1 and now it is the blue copy, then it doesn't make sense anymore, and then I have to search for your evidence. So make sure that it is in one document and in the correct order. Very, very important, annotate. Annotate your evidence because that tells us the story, and link your evidence to the behavioral statement. Say, for example, you select 3.4 medicine dispensing, and you have a prescription there that you want to evaluate to see if it is if it meets the legislative requirements. Then you need to indicate that this prescription, after you have evaluated it and indicated that the prescription is valid, you must say that this is evidence for 3.4a, so that we know which behavioral statement you address. In this way, this will also help you to make sure that your evidence is sufficient. If you sign, identify your own signature. Okay, so what kind of evidence do you think would you provide if you are providing information to a patient? Patient asks you something, what information will you give to that patient? Whereas, what information, okay, it can be a prescription, it can be information from the patient information leaflet, it can be from a website. If you provide evidence to a group of people, then obviously it will differ. You will have an attendance register, you will maybe have a presentation, you will have the reference materials that you used, feedback forms that you got from the attendants. If you have an attendance register, make sure that you have the presenter name on there, the date that it took place, and the venue that it took place. Don't just take an A4 piece of paper and let everyone write their name down. Make sure your name is on there, that you were the presenter. There should only be one presenter. If you have feedback on the presentation, it should reflect knowledge and understanding of the audience of what you have presented. It is not, they should not rate you as a presenter. And please do not provide a blank feedback form, because then it still doesn't tell us anything. So it must be a filled out feedback form. I'm consulting with a patient. I will have the patient history as evidence, maybe the prescription or the request from the patient, maybe the blue copy, the label, and again, the reference materials that I used. But what if I'm consulting with a doctor? Now it will be different evidence that you submit for consultation. So obviously the reason for consultation, you might have the prescription and it's unclear what the doctor wrote, or you think there's an error or the dosage is wrong. And then also the reference material that you use to identify that problem and to make the suggestions. If you use references from the internet, make sure it is scientific. Wikipedia is not scientific, so don't use Wikipedia as a reference. Your references should also be annotated. Don't just put the page from the WHO or the Department of Health, whatever. Annotate them. What is it? Why is it there? And then include the page number and the edition as well, if you use the SMF. Or the months for that matter. Okay, so sometimes you will attend a meeting. Then you can submit the agenda. You can have the attendance register, the minutes of the meeting. But important, what was your contribution to the meeting? Did you just attend or did you participate in the meeting? Remember, there's a difference. If you have to participate in a pharmaceutical and therapeutics committee, it doesn't mean you should just attend the meetings, then you have not participated. You are all attending this workshop, but how have you participated in the workshop? So be careful and be aware of that. I will also be working with data. It can be screenings that you did. So the reason for the data collection should be important. It's screening, it's data analysis of a master study that you did, data that you gathered. So think about the evidence if you work with data. Why is it there? Why is it included? And then again, the checklist for the evidence, we have had it with the implementation as well. So again, have I checked that I have sufficient evidence? Have I annotated my evidence? Have I annotated with the behavioral statements? And does this match the behavioral statements? Is my evidence clear? And have I made sure that all patient identifying details have been hidden? That means the name, the surname, the ID number. And if you do patient confidentiality, make sure to check all the aspects where a patient's name can appear. Not just the prescription, also the labels, the trailer label, the blue copy, the Schedule 6 register, the attendance register. So make sure about that. So in summary, your evidence is proof of what you did. It's not just that you have read an article. It's not a theoretical scenario. It's not witnessing someone else. You can't say, I witnessed the procurement officer ordered the stock and unpacking it. Then you have not showed us how you did it. So it must convince the assessor that you have performed the activity. Remember, it is what you want to learn. And it must be professional. Your evidence must be professional. It must be neat and clear, not scribbled on a prescription. Make sure that it looks professional. Important again that you have performed it. Okay, so here I'm going to hand over to Prof. Nadine. She will go through the example and then also the pitfalls and the professionalism. Thank you, Prof.
I think it's we should have our break now.
Oh yes, that's true. Tabang.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Rianda. Yes, we're going to take a 10 minutes break. The time now is 10:38. If we can be back by 10:50 so that we can continue. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready
Good
to
morning
go?
once again, colleagues. Yes, we are now is 10:50. We're going to hand over to Prof. Butler to take us through the second part of the CPD evaluation presentation. And I just want to remind you that please stay with us. The link for the survey questionnaire will be shared with you on chat. Please make sure that you go and do as I've requested you earlier, so that we don't miss you as an attendee for this workshop. And thank you so much. Over to you, Prof. Butler.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our colleagues, to the interns, to the tutors. And I'm sure at this stage your heads are spinning around with all the new information that you've received so far. Anyway, we're in for the next hall now, and there's going to be quite a bit more new information. And the reason I'm starting off by saying this is not a one-off. You can't attend this workshop today and think that, okay, I've got all the information. Please, there's a reason why this presentation will be available. There's a reason why they paid so much attention to how to download your your intern tutor manual. These are things that you're going to need to come back to again and again and again, because there's no ways that anybody can internalize all the information that you're being presented with today. So up to now, I think Dr. Jabir has given you an overview of the CPD process, gone through some very, very important information about evidence and etc. And so now we're going to start pulling it together, and I'm going to work through an actual CPD entry example. Now, guys, we thought long and hard about putting this example in here. It's not in here just for the interns to copy and paste this example, okay? Please don't do that. So start off with...
Sorry, Prof.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please share your screen?
I thought it was being shared. What's on now?
Perfect, thank you.
And but it's not in slideshow yet, huh?
No, yes, put it in slideshow.
Come on. Are we okay now?
Yeah,
I've got
yet.
slides. Not yet. I've got slideshow on mine. What are you seeing?
We're seeing your team screen.
This one is this. You're seeing the team screen, and I'm sharing my content. I'm sharing my screen.
Go to the PowerPoint. Sorry, Prof.
Okay.
Okay, you need to share your screen again on Teams.
Natalie, are you saying you saying you can share? Or should I?
I don't have the updated presentations, but
I'm clicking.
There we go. Perfect, Prof. That's
Is
it.
it on? Okay, now it's just jumped one ahead. Let me just go. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So very typically,
Prof.
yes.
Just when it is not yet showing on our side, just give us a minute, please. It's a bit slow.
Too much technology.
Yeah. Nothing is coming forth from my side. I'm not sure if others can see.
I don't know what else to do because I go onto PowerPoint and then I share
No,
on
Prof, you're 100%. The problem is on my side.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Tabang, can you see?
Yes. Now
Great, you can go ahead, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Intern. So typically what would happen in your work situation is there's an incident. Something happens. And in this example, we are supposing that you were asked to participate in one or other public health campaign. And when that happens, what should be happening in your brains is, this could work for my next CPD entry. So what you need to do then is to think about this trigger incident, and you'll see on your pages when you're entering your CPD, somewhere you're going to have to identify what happened, what triggered the CPD. So this would be your trigger here that you were asked to participate in this. So it's a public health campaign. So you look at your 6 domains, and it's pretty clear that this one is relevant to domain 1. The next step, remember that, go back to that slide that was shared earlier, the 7-step, the stepwise process to entering your CPD. So step 1 was choose the domain. Step 2 was to choose the relevant competency. So you would go to domain 1, and you'll see that there are 6 competencies. You'd look at all of the competencies under domain 1, and you would decide quite correctly that the most relevant one is 1.1, which is the promotion of health and wellness. So why did you choose that? Because, you looked at these behavioral statements here, and it looked as if it was going to fit. So you've got the competency standard 1.1. You've already read through all the behavioral statements. You've noted that there are 4 behavioral statements. And now you're ready to start on phase 1 of your CPD cycle, which is reflection. Okay, so can you see the learning title there? It's not merely a copy of the competency standard, and the competency standard says promotion of health and wellness. But here your learning title is actually descriptive. It tells you what the campaign was about, and it also says where. So that's a really good learning title. What triggered it? Okay, there we've said something happened. You realized that there was something that you didn't know how to do. Perfect scenario for your CPD. Then you have to very clearly, don't assume that somebody else can get into your head and understand what it is that you recognized as your learning need. Because 2 people might be involved in the same incident, but they might recognize slightly different learning needs. So focus on your learning need and very clearly write that there. I needed to learn. Okay? So the competency is about promotion of health and wellness. So you are identifying a learning need that is related to that competency. And then also in the reflection, the last part of the reflection is, why am I going to do this? What is it that I want to be able to do at the end of this? So what do I hope to achieve? So as assessors, that's what we're going to look for. Do we have a learning title, what triggered it, your learning need, and what you hope to achieve? So you're going to move on now. So you've reflected on that, and now the next step, very important, is the planning. What do you plan to do? So you've said, okay, I'm going to plan to make a poster, but just making a poster, that's not enough in terms of planning. So yeah, very nicely, this example shows you that you're planning to make a poster using relevant sources. okay, sources that are valid, current, etc. And you've identified here what you consider as being relevant sources. What are you going to provide information on? And you can see the A, the C, and the B here. Those are referring to the behavioral statements associated with Competency Standard 1.1. And it's step by step here what you plan to do. So not only are you going to make a poster, because if you make a poster and put it under your bed, that's really no good. This is about promotion of health and wellness. So in your planning, you should also focus on how are you going to use your poster. Okay, many of the interns we found spend a lot of time making a poster and uploading this evidence of the poster. And we say, so you made a poster. So what? You know, how did you use your poster? So in your planning, think through all the steps of how you will use your poster to promote health and wellness. Okay, so there's all of that. And then very important in your planning, you also need to write there, why did you decide to plan in this particular way? So planning, to recap, it's what you plan to do and why you plan to do it in that particular way. Right, so having reflected, having planned, you're now ready to go on and actually implement. So you see right away in this example how the tenses change from the planning, which is in the future tense. Now you're looking back. I did, I consulted, I formulated, I made the poster, I presented the poster, where, what you did, and you received feedback. So there's a story there of what you did. But the most important thing that I want you to look at in this CPD entry example is how your implementation story is linked to your evidence and it is linked to the behavioral statements. Okay, please, interns, you will save yourself a lot of heartache and grief and anger and disappointment and whatever negative emotion we can think about. If you remember that in your implementation story, you link it to your evidence. So we can see already that there's evidence A, D, we've got, so it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that's 7. So you have 7 pieces of evidence. You've linked it to the different parts of your implementation story. And most importantly, you've also linked it to the behavioral statements. Now, this is really important because if you've written your implementation and you look at it and you say, oh, oops, I've only actually got links here to 2 of the 4 behavioral statements, then right away you know my implementation is incomplete because I must be able to have enough implementation and enough evidence to back that to link to at least 3 of the 4 behavioral statements. So this is very, very useful. It makes sure that at the end of the day that you will have sufficient evidence to cover the requirements in terms of the number of behavioral statements. Okay, so to recap here, you've got a story of exactly what you did. Each part of what you did is linked to your evidence, and your evidence must obviously be labeled as it's labeled here. And in addition, you've got the link to the behavioral statement. So now you know, also once you've written it this way, when you upload evidence A, you must make sure that you annotate it with 1.1a. When you upload evidence F, you must make sure that that piece of evidence is annotated with 1.1d. And, you know, that helps you to keep track of everything. Right, implementation. So now you've been thinking, you know, as you've gone through this, you've got what are the possible pieces of evidence that you can use. You've identified all of that. And you've done this, you know, while you are obviously, it's just done in part of your planning, and you keep track of your pieces of evidence in your implementation. And okay, and where, with your pieces of evidence, as we saw in the implementation, you think, where does it fit in? Which piece of my implementation story does this support? And also at the same time, keeping track of the behavioral statements, and have you covered sufficient of them? Right. We come to the last part, the last page in your Cpd entries, which is evaluation. So I learned, and so many of the interns come a crop a year because under evaluation, they write implementation. They say, what I did was I made a poster and then I presented the poster, blah, 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 blah. No, that does not belong here under evaluation. Evaluation implies that you're done with it. You did all of that you've written. And evaluation means you take a standpoint looking back. Okay, having done that, what do I know now that I didn't know before I started that activity? And that is the first part of evaluation. I learned, in other words, I now know how to provide advice and participate in public health campaigns. And you can see here that what you learned is in line with the competency standard, in line with that promotion of health and wellness. The second part of evaluation, we ask for application. Okay, so you've identified there what you learned. Now, were you able to put that learning into practice in a different setting? Okay, we're done with that COVID-19, whatever you wrote about in your implementation, you're done with that. This word subsequently is very, very important. And again, here many interns fail to see the difference here between what you learned, looking back at what you did, the implementation. Wow, I'm making my own words here. The subsequent implementation, how did you take what you learned and apply it in a different situation? Okay, so subsequently, I participate in a diabetic screening day, and you can, write a little bit more about that. You don't have to provide evidence for that. And then the third part of your evaluation is, okay, now what? Having engaged in that activity, having identified what I've learned, having subsequently applied my new learning, when I look at it now and I think about it, what do I see as my future gaps? What other gaps are there? So you need to identify your future learning needs. And then lastly, what has been the impact of this activity of mine? So here you look at this evaluation example and you can see that it has all four parts. Please, interns, make sure that you cover all the aspects of the evaluation that are required and not just what you learned. So let's move on now to the assessment. You've done your bit. You've completed your entry. You've sent it to your tutor for verification. The tutor's okayed it. It's been submitted. And it now sees the light of day when your assessor opens the screen and looks at your entry. So in general, the assessment, different parts of your entry are assessed, and mostly they are done on a scale of 0 to 3. 0, 1, 2, or 3. So obviously you would like to score 3 points for each part of the Cpd entry. Well, you've got to work a little bit to get the 3 marks. But all you have to do is meet all the requirements. And that's why my introductory comment was, this is not a one-off to attend this workshop. You have to go back to the documents. Those checklists that Dr. Joubert showed you, she showed you the different parts. Guys, we cannot stress enough how important those checklists are, because that will help you to see whether you have fulfilled all the criteria. Okay, so follow the assessment criteria. Look at the checklist. and fix it, because unless you've fulfilled all the criteria, you're not going to get the 3 points, and you need to get the 3s. And again, you are professional people. Please, guys, check your language, check your names of your products that you use. If it's a trade name, a capital letter, a little trade name mark, okay. And spelling and grammar are not auto-corrected, okay? You have to do your own correction. And please, this talks to planning. You can't leave your CPD entries until the day before the due date. First of all, you're not going to have time to do it. You're not going to have time to send it to your tutor. Your tutor's not going to have time to verify it, and it's definitely going to be late. So, and if you leave things too late, you're not going to have an opportunity to check everything carefully. So, this scale of 0 to 3, it's all about these requirements. So if you've done one of the requirements, you get a 1, and it'll be partially met or fully met. But these details for every section of your CPD entry are contained in the appendix, which talks about the assessment criteria. And it'll show you for each one how the 1s and the 2s and the 3s are allocated. Okay. So there again, another reminder why it's so important for you to have that manual. A reminder as well that you have that assessment grid. It might be a really good idea to actually print out these documents. Might be easier than keep going to look for them online. And then, as I said, don't forget the checklist as well. Also very, very useful here. All right. So this is what the assessors do. This is how they go through and they look at each stage of your CPD entry and they assign a 0, a 1, a 2, and a 3. What happens then is that when the marks are released, you are then able to see your CPD entry, and then you'll see your entry, and you'll also be able to see feedback from the assessors. So what sort of feedback will you expect to see? You will expect to see comments. And I must tell you that the assessors are really good, particularly if you've been, they're parts of your CPD entry where you've only been given a partially met or a not yet met. The assessors will always, in the comment box, they will put a little explanatory comment there, helping you to see why they have thought that that particular part of your entry does not yet fully meet the requirements. So they will give you comments. The comments will be dated. You also see positive comments. They're not only negative comments, sometimes planning well done or something like that. But very important, when there are negative comments, it's not just going to be a comment, you didn't do this properly. That's not what the assessors do. The assessors will say, your planning is incomplete. Look to including the details of the resources that you plan to use. Okay? So they will give you pointers. They will point you in the direction of what you will be needing to do to improve that entry so that when you resubmit it, you can get a better outcome. Okay? They will also give you comments, and we know that the assessors will tell you that most of the comments is around annotation. No, I should correct that and say most of the comments are around the lack of annotation, incomplete annotation. So please, Dr. GB spent a lot of time showing you good and bad examples of annotation. So spend time on your annotation, and then you won't need your assessors to do that. And, you won't have to have your whole entry sent back to you for resubmission. Okay, so that's what you can expect from your assessors. And, you're in the fortunate position that you're going to have feedback sessions later in the year. This is the first year that that's happening, and I think we're all, very excited about that prospect of giving you that extra opportunity to get some feedback from the assessors. Right, so if you're in the unfortunate position where a particular entry has been graded as not yet competent, you look at the assessor comments, and interns, I don't know how to say this, but it's just really hard to believe how many interns think, oh, I couldn't be bothered. I'm just going to resubmit my entry in exactly the same way. I'm sure it's going to be okay the second time. No, it's not going to be okay. Some interns think, oh man, I think I just got an assessor on a bad day. I'm going to resubmit it exactly the same, and maybe I'll get another assessor who won't be so tough. Sorry, guys. When your entry is resubmitted, it's going to go back to the same assessor who will be able to see the comments that they made, and they'll be able to see where you have changed your entry or whether you haven't. Okay. And we see so many entries where the assessor simply says, you haven't paid attention to my previous comments. So save yourselves the trouble, guys. And you cannot simply resubmit. It's not going to pass muster if it didn't pass muster in the first submission, unless you attend to the comments and the guidelines that the assessors give you. It's not going to be any better the second time around. Okay, so fix it, and if you can see in the beginning the conditions and the application procedure and the timelines for resubmission. Okay, so I think for you as interns, the most important thing for your mind, get your mindset into, I must do 6 CPDs, and my objective, my aim is to submit 6 CPDs that are assessed, and they're assessed at being competent the first time around. That is the ideal, and it is so doable. It's absolutely doable if you follow the guidelines, if you use your assessment criteria, if you use your checklists, if you do things on time, if you carefully screen everything. And there isn't a nicer feeling than getting your CPD entries back and it's judged to be competent the first time around. So set yourselves your target, and then it'll save yourselves a lot of trouble, a lot of heartache during your internship here. Okay, I think we've covered all of these. Okay. You don't really want to go along this resubmission route because you do it too often. Okay. So you have 6. So 3 of them you can resubmit. Your 4th resubmission, it's going to start costing you. And I'm sure you can think of many more exciting things to spend your salary on than paying for resubmissions beyond your 9 entries. Let's talk about a few general things. This Dr. Johnson did mention this in her presentation as well. But remember that professionalism is paramount. Plagiarism. The universe is a strange beast. And we have seen so many examples where 2 interns decide, you know what? Nobody's ever going to pick it up if we submit the same entries. And Sod's law and all the other laws you can think of. And this has happened again and again, where interns have tried to diddle the process like this, work together, plagiarized each other's entries, and they get the same assessor. It happens, life happens, And so it's just not worth even trying to do that. You're professional people. You're embarking on this route towards your full registration as a pharmacist. There is no place for this kind of unprofessional activities. Obviously, any instances of unprofessional behavior will be dealt with very, very seriously. Okay. And I think if you get your mindset right from the beginning, if you're going to be saying, oh, I got to do these CPDs, it's such a bind, then it's going to be a bind. Then it's going to be a hassle. But if you have a different mindset and say, I have to do my 6 CPDs as an intern, but it's wonderful doing my CPDs as an intern because I have so much support, which means that in subsequent years, for every year into the future that I'm registered as a pharmacist and I have to do CPDs, it's going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be so easy. So it's about your mindset. It's about saying CPDs is part of me. CPDs is part of who I am as a professional person. So there is no space for plagiarism. It's about your practice. It's about you being a professional. So if you can get your minds right, because enjoy doing your CPDs this year because you're going to get feedback from assessors. You're going to have those feedback sessions. After this into the future, there's going to be no such support. So use the support, enjoy the CPDs, and it'll make your life and your whole professional life so much easier. One area where we see some non-professional behavior is in terms of confidentiality. And I think the easiest way to think about confidentiality of your patient's details is to sit back and ask yourself, how would I feel if my details, if my prescription was shared with people that I don't know? And I don't think that there's any one of you out there that would say, well, that's going to be okay. You know? So if you put yourself into the patient's position, I think it will trigger and it will remind us how important it is to keep their patient details confidential. Okay? And sometimes you take photos of your patients, maybe of you talking to the patient, and that's absolutely fine. And the patient, you might say to the patient, is it okay that I use your photograph? And the patient says, absolutely fine. Guys, it's not absolutely fine unless you've obscured their faces. Okay, so use the photographs, but you can use the blackout, put pixels on it. You guys know how to do it. So even if the patient gives you permission to use their photograph, use it, but obscure their faces. Okay. Now, if you breach patient confidentiality, automatically that CPD entry is deemed not yet competent. It can be perfect in every other aspect, but it will automatically be considered not yet competent and sent back to you. This is a very, very, very serious breach of professionalism, so take it seriously. Generally, we don't find that interns make mistakes about obscuring patient details on prescriptions. But as you heard, it's on labels, on trailer labels. And very importantly, Schedule 6 registers. That's where we see most examples of patient details not being obscured. Okay, so remember, it's not only on prescriptions. Look at those other instances, those other documents where patient details are there. So your trailer labels, etc. Remember, we're only talking about confidentiality of patients. If you have any identifying details of a nurse or a doctor or another pharmacist of a professional person engaged in their professional scope of practice, you do not have to obscure their identifying details. All right. So if you have a prescription The doctor writes a prescription. You do not have to obscure their details because that prescription is part of him or her practicing their profession, okay? Or a nurse or another pharmacist. Or it doesn't apply to facilities, hospitals, clinics, etc. Only to patient details. Also, when you have attendance registers, you have your colleagues attending a talk. They're attending that as part of their professional working day. So you do not have to obscure their names as well. Okay. Because otherwise it goes crazy and we end up where you've blanked out everything and we can't see anything. So remember, confidentiality is only pertinent to patients. And don't just scribble it out. Make sure that it's properly obscured. Okay. So that's a good, okay. And you see that scribble there didn't quite work. Okay. So we've worked to that. So now once again, I want to take you back to that stepwise approach. You're now ready to do it. And we're going to do something different here. This is new. This is the first time that we've put this into the presentation for the interns. And what's going to follow now has come from the collective experience of all the assessors and the moderators. When the assessors and moderators get together for their meetings, we talk about what are the common mistakes that the interns make? Where do the interns go wrong? So in the next set of slides now, we've collated all that information, all that collective wisdom, and we're giving it to you. Why are we bothering to do this? Because we want you to be successful the first time around. So please, interns, take this information, which will come back to it, keep looking at it, because we've worked as assessors and moderators. We've worked hard to put this together, and we've done it for you to try to make your journey towards a successful CPD portfolio, to make that a shorter journey without resubmissions. All right. So just a reminder, step 1, you choose your domain. Step 2, you choose your competency standard. And now we're going to give you some tips. What we've done is we've taken each one of the competency standards in each of the 6 domains and we've classified them. We've given them a classification as either being recommended, possible, or challenging. Now, what does this mean? If we have considered that a particular competency standard is recommended, it means that we think it's a good choice for you as an intern. It means that we think you should be able to complete that competency standard with no problems whatsoever. So look which one of the competency standards under each of the domains we have considered to be recommended. Then some of the competency standards we've labeled as being possible. We're not saying to you, you cannot choose them. But we are saying that if you decide to choose one of the competency standards, which we've labeled as possible, you may find it difficult. And you should think very, very carefully about choosing them. The reason why we have these, because we have some interns that are in, very different practice settings. And for, a small number of interns, there might be these competency standards, which is perfect for them, but it's not really recommended for everybody. So when you see a competency standard that's labeled as possible, you need to ask yourself, am I able to do it in my practice setting? Will I be able to collect enough evidence in my practice setting to cover the required number of behavioral statements? Okay. And if the answer is no, go and choose one which is recommended. You don't really have to make life difficult for yourself. Okay. So to recap, possible is possible. You're allowed to choose it. But what we're saying is you're probably going to find it really, really difficult. And then lastly, in each of the domains, we have identified and labeled one or more of the competency standards as being challenging. When you see a label of challenging, avoid it, don't do it, you're not allowed to, don't go there. I don't know how else to say it. Okay? It's going to be, we wanted to say here it will be impossible, but we thought we'd say extremely difficult. And ladies and gentlemen, this is from years and years of practice with these domains. You don't need to make life, so don't choose these. There are very good reasons why we've identified particular competency standards as not being appropriate for you as an intern. And you might say, well, why are they there? If you go back to the Competency Framework, remember, the Competency Framework is not being designed for interns. It has been designed for all pharmacists. And that's why we are able to identify some of the competency standards as being challenging and which an intern should avoid. You'll get to them later. You've got many, many years where you'll be doing Cpd entries and you'll get to the situation where you are able to look at those competency standards. So this is new. This has never been seen before. So please, go back and look at them. So now we're going to go through domain by domain and just run through what they are. Okay, so domain 1, we'll see we have 3 challenging ones, 1 possible, and 1 which is recommended. We've also put next to these decisions, we've called them a decision-making aid, we've put down some comments. Okay, we've also tried to give a reason why we've said to you, why we've said avoid 1.3, why we've said to avoid 1.4. And we've even given you this one here. If you think 1.4, no, don't do it. And if it's about generic substitution or submission, then we've even given you a pointer here. Look at domain 4 and you probably find one there. Okay. And we've, read the comments. There's no ways you're going to remember if I go step by step through all of the comments. These slides are here for you to come back to. So first of all, you're going to choose your domain. You're going to choose one and then, okay, I think it's 1.1. Then you look at the comment. Oh, what else have they told us here? And something important to remember, it's about public health, lots of people. All right. It's not about talking to an individual people. Public, you get the idea, public, it's about a group of people. If you're choosing 1.6, we've just highlighted here that you should make sure that you include it. Screening activity. Okay. So as we go through, you'll see every domain, there's a similar slide here. Number 2. And again, some comments that will help you along. And I'll reiterate again, where do these comments come from? The collective experiences of the assessors and moderators. When we've come together and in agreement, we said, lots of the interns forget to include the patient. So 2.1, the competency standard is patient consultation. And we've noticed that the interns, a number of them, forget to include the patient. So we've just put that as a little comment there. Okay. 2.5 is therapeutic outcome monitoring. We've labeled it as possible. And if you think it's possible, we're warning you against it. But we've warned you that if you think it's possible, make sure that you understand the scope of therapeutic outcome monitoring. Because it's about, you actually have to provide evidence of monitoring therapeutic outcomes. And that's perhaps something that many interns don't do formally in their day-to-day. Okay. 2.8, just leave it alone. Don't go there, avoid it. And it's only for interns. involved in registered clinical trials. And so we go on. 3.1, there's a very important comment there. It is possible, but only for interns in the manufacturing sector. All right. So for interns in the manufacturing sector, the decision there is actually recommended. For everybody else, don't do it because it's only for the manufacturing sector. 3.6, for example, is medicine disposal or destruction. Okay, it is possible, but only if you are able to collect enough evidence to complete all the behavioral statements. So, for example, if I look at 3.6, medicine recall, disposal, and destruction, it's about requesting patients to return any unused, unwanted, or expired medicines. It's about quarantining return damaged, expired, etc. medicines, and then applying the guidelines to the recall of medicines. So it's possible. Not everybody will be able to collect enough evidence, but if you can, make sure that it covers that you've actually been exposed to medicine recall and you can cover all the behavioral statements. Okay. 3.5 is recommended, and that is compounding. And most interns choose this one. And it can be either bulk compounding if you're in an institution, or it can be extemporaneous compounding which tends to be the activity in a community pharmacy. 3.4, put a bit asterisk somewhere in your mind there. 3.4 is medicine dispensing, and again, it's a go-to one, highly recommended for interns, to choose either 3.4 or 3.5. 3.4, though, has 9 behavioral statements. And the first one of the behavioral statements under dispensing is evaluating, interpreting, and preparing the prescription. And many interns go wrong here, is that they do a great job with that particular behavioral statement. They do a great job in documenting and providing evidence for the evaluating, interpreting, and preparing a prescription, but they forget about the other behavioral statements. So if you're going to be choosing 3.4, make sure that you've read all the behavioral statements and that you're providing enough evidence to cover at least 75%. And so that's why our comment there is that you must cover all the dispensing activities. Okay. 4, we're coming on now to domain 4, which is the management, organization and management. Quite a difficult, a challenging domain for interns. 4.6 is really the one that we recommend. And we recommend this if you are applying internal SOPs. So that's the recommended one. There are a couple of others which are possible. So, choose them at your peril. And we do recommend that 4.6 is the one that has been deemed to be doable by every intern without any problems. But there might be some interns who look at 4.1, 4.3, and 4.4 and say, I can do this. I am able to collect sufficient evidence in my practice to meet the requirements. Domain 5, guys, 5.1, 5.2, 5.4 through to 5.8. Don't go there. All right. Domain 5, every intern must do 5.3. It is the compulsory one. Okay. And there is no other interpretation for the word compulsory. It's not slightly compulsory or sometimes compulsory. It simply means do 5.3, end of story. Okay? I hope we've got that message has come through loud and clear. If you try any of the others, it's not even going to be assessed. It's simply going to be sent back to you, not yet competent, redo it. Domain 6, we won't deny that this is also a challenging domain for interns. And I think here for domain 6, these decision-making aid labels are particularly useful. I want to draw your attention particularly to 6.2 and 6.3. There's a lot of confusion between 6.2 and 6.3. 6.2 is provision of education and training. And in 6.2, it says that you are teaching to an agreed training plan, you're performing self-assessment, and you're participating in the development of learning activities. So you can use 6.2 if, as an intern, you are involved in training pharmacist assistants in the workplace. That is the recommended competency standard to choose. But you must talk there about your agreed training plan. So what was your interaction with your tutor? What did you decide on? What materials, your time frame? You must do a self-assessment. Identify your learning needs. Your learning needs in terms of providing education and training. And then also developing, how did you develop the learning materials? So most interns are involved in some sort of training in the workplace, and we recommend that you choose 6.2. Now 6.3, when you read through it quickly, seems similar to 6.3, seems similar to 6.2. 6.3 says participating in the formal education of students. Now the clue is in that word students. And what do we mean by students? We mean people that are enrolled in an educational institution. So right away you're saying, but PAs, are they involved with some sort of learning institution? Your pharmacist assistants are considered as learners. So when we are looking at students, for your purposes, we are only considering undergraduate pharmacy students. So 6.3 is possible because it is best suited to academic interns. All right? Academic interns getting involved in the academic program of the undergraduate students. So interns, if you're doing training and it's not pharmacy students, choose 6.2. If it is pharmacy students, choose 6.3. We might even have interns who are training pharmacy students in the workplace. We know that the university sent the pharmacy students out into some of the hospitals and the interns to get involved. If you are doing that, that is part of the undergraduate pharmacy students as part of their formal training. So 6.3 would work. Okay, so that's a very important distinction there between 6.2 and 6.3. 6.4, 5, and 8, challenging, think very carefully. 6.7 is supervision of other researchers. It's obviously not appropriate for interns, even if you are an academic intern. So 6.7 is not possible at all. So don't do it. All right, so that's the first round where we've given you the decision-making aids. So it's to help you with step 2 on that ladder, which is choosing your competency standards. Now we go to step 4, which is complete the cycle. And very quickly, I'm not going to spend time on this. Once you've chosen your competency standards, go to these slides and we will give you some pointers here about the evidence that you need for each of them. Okay, so we're repeating again the competency standards, the decision-making aid, and for most of them, we're giving you just some tips on what type of evidence or how to annotate the evidence. And again, this has come from the experience that the assessors and moderators have had with the interns. Okay. So again, it's not worth going through it now. This pertains to you once you've chosen your CS. Go to these and look at them. It gives you some details. 2.3 and 2.4, where we're telling you should multiple patients, multiple activities, etc. 3. And I believe that maybe next year we'll be filling in some more of the gaps there. But I think there's enough here in the third column to help you along. 4 again. 5, let's spend a little bit of time here. 5 is about, 5.3 is about ethical and legal practice. So if we're talking about how you practice ethically, how you practice legally, we want to know what are you referring to? What are you basing what you consider to be ethical practice? What are you basing what you consider to be legal practice on? So you must include annotated extracts of the code of conduct, the legislation, that's whatever, okay? So on what basis are you describing an aspect of your practice which you think shows that you can practice legally and ethically? If you read there, it's talking about keeping abreast, and that means if it's the new stuff. All right. Now, we can't say when legislation changes. You might be in a situation where there's new regulations coming out during your internship year. It might be that there was something new last year. But whatever it is, you must be able to prove that you know what is the current legislation or what has been recently amended. Of course, it's always easier if there's been a recent amendment to the legislation. But if there hasn't, you must be able to show in your evidence that you know what is the most recent and not pull out something from 20 years ago. Okay. Part of practicing ethically and legally is making sure that you have professional indemnity. Again, just uploading evidence of your professional indemnity is not enough. Make sure that it is annotated. Okay. And now suddenly my screen is frozen. Oh, no, there we go. All right. And again, the same for number 6. Okay, interns, as I said, these last sets of slides were new, and we hope that you are going to find them useful. We're coming to the end of the presentation, and I want to just change tack now and just have a few comments addressed to the tutors that are in the audience. Tutors, you are obviously extremely important. And while, you know, the interns need to take responsibility because, after all, it's their CPD, it's their internship, they need you. And so we just want to remind the tutors, and I think most of the tutors know this, you there as a role model, because if you are not practicing ethically and legally, and we hope that that's not ever happening, how can we expect the interns to reflect on their ethical and legal practice? So I think for tutors, it's a good time for you to take stock of your own practice and say, am I being the best role model that I can be to my tutor? Because remember, if we think about the 7-star pharmacists, one of our roles as professional people is to be a teacher. It's one of the key elements, key roles of being a pharmacist. And so, you know, to do that, you need to be a role model and a mentor. Just remember, tutors, this is not just a one-way street. You can use your activities in being a tutor, you can use that to fulfill your own CPD requirements. So you can use, go to domain 6, for example, and you can choose one of those, and you can describe your interactions during your year as being a tutor, and there's a CPD entry done and dusted for you. So you get something out of it as well. Tutor verification. Tutors, all we can do is appeal to you, tutors. It's extremely important. It's not just a question of clicking a box. We know you're busy. We appreciate that. But we do ask you to cast an eye over it. We do ask you to be familiar with the CPD cycle. We do ask you to look at the assessment criteria and the check boxes. And if nothing else, to just say to your interns, did you check the assessment criteria? Can you tell me that you've looked at the assessment criteria? Can you tell me that you've used the checklists? And I think that will be a very, very useful way for the tutors to get involved. Put the responsibility on the tutor, on the intern. Make the intern say, oh, did I do it? And if the intern be able to say to you with confidence, yes, I did it, because that makes your tutor verification process a lot easier. Okay. But as I said, and again, also if the entry unfortunately comes back, try to be there for the interns and assist them with the resubmission and understanding the assessor comments and fixing up their entries. Right, we're not saying that the tutor needs to be responsible for anything, of course not, but you're there in an extraordinarily important support role. And we're hoping that you're going to enjoy your role, because you know what, the interns can't do it without you. And so we really are encouraging you to play a very active role in your interns' lives. And most of all, nothing is worth doing if you don't enjoy it. So again, it's all about that mindset. Enjoy the journey. And, when you're enjoying the journey, it seems so much shorter. And I think the ultimate prize is when you can say to your colleagues, my intern had 6 CPD entries and all 6 were competent the first time around. Then you can really brag as a tutor. Okay, the intern did the work, but you can brag as a tutor, and that's a good feeling. We've talked about that. And it helps you to become a lifelong learner. And that, interns and tutors, brings to an end my part of this presentation. And now I don't know the logistics of this, but I hope it's been useful. And please, please, please go back to this presentation, go to your manuals, go to the assessment criteria, go to the checklist. And last of all, I want to wish you an enjoyable internship, and there's bigger and brighter things waiting for you next year. So get this internship done in 2022. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. And colleagues, this brings us to the end of the second presentation for the day, which is the last presentation. And please note that the link to the survey questionnaire has been posted. Please make sure that you write you insert your personal details there, and then we will appreciate if you can also answer the questions that are there, because that will assist us in improving the workshops in the future. And then for now, we will be attending to the questions that have been submitted via chat. Natalie, may you please read them for us?
Thanks, Sabang. We've got 5 questions. Do I black out names on attendance register for a public health campaign?
I'll take that one. And the answer is no. You'll go back to the presentation. It is specifically stated there. No, somebody who's attending a presentation as part of their work requirements, you don't have to obscure the details.
May I just add, if it's patients that is attending the health campaign, then their name should be blacked out. If it is, so everything that's a patient, no names, only a signature or whatever. If it's a healthcare professional, then no need for blacking out the names.
Okay, thank you, Rianda and Prof. We can move on to the next one, Natalie.
Okay, question from Facebook. Ahmed Kamis asks, good morning, I have a question. I've completed my 400 hours. Does my academic tutor or my tutor at my practicing facility complete my progress reports and the declaration that my 400 hours have been completed?
Thanks, Natalie. So the progress reports for academic interns are completed by the tutor, but the declaration of the 400 hours is completed by the supervising pharmacist at the pharmacy where they completed their hours.
Okay, what type of evidence would annotated proof of indemnity be?
Okay, I'll take this one. All of us need to have indemnity insurance. So typically you will have your indemnity certificate, and you can have the part from the Act or the GPP where it states that indemnity is needed. And then you can link those two and say that this is your indemnity and it is active. If you look at the date, say your indemnity insurance is up to date and is valid.
Anita would like to know if there are more than...
Natalie,
yes,
I think Rianda was not that much audible. Can she just repeat the answer, please?
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to answer again the type of evidence with that annotated proof of indemnity be. All of us need to have indemnity insurance. So you will typically have your indemnity insurance certificate, and then you will have the part of the GPP or the Act where it states that we need indemnity insurance. You will link those two with each other. You will say, because it's compulsory, this is the proof that I do have it, and this is the date, so it is active. So my indemnity insurance is up to date.
Okay, thank you. Anita would like to know if there are more than 4 behavioural standards, must you discuss all 100% and only submit evidence for 75%, or can you only discuss 75% as well?
Okay, I'll take that one. Anita, the 75% would apply across the board. So in your planning, so let's say you see that there are 4 behavioral statements, you know that 3 of them. So in your planning already, you'll be thinking, which of these 3 behavioral statements will I be able to collect evidence for? And that will then guide your planning and your implementation. So it will go through. However, while the requirement is that you submit evidence for at least 75%, and then that will obviously drive your discussion will be on 75%, there's nothing that precludes you from discussing the other behavioral statement as well. But if you're only discussing the 3 and having evidence for the 3, that will be acceptable. That will be sufficient. But again, if you feel you want to, if part of your discussion and it's you've got the discussion, then include it by all means, because remember it says at least 75%, not at most 75%. So if one of the behavioral statements is just really difficult, it's something that doesn't apply in your setting, then it's okay not to discuss it and not to have evidence for it. And as I said, that's 1 out of 4. And you can do the maths when there are more than four behavioral statements.
KS Mbaklele would like to know, to be able to write the practical exam in June, am I required to be competent in a minimum of 3 CPDs before then, even though the pre-reg would be in August?
Thanks, Natalie. So the number of CPDs that you're required to be competent in depends on your date of registration. So interns that have that at the day of the examination would be registered or in their 6th month are required to have submitted 6 and competent in 3. If you are then in your 9th month, that changes to competent in 6 and having submitted 6. So it does change according to your date of registration. This is outlined in the Tutor Intern Manual as well.
Thanks, Dan. Anonymous, can I submit more than 1 CPD at a time?
I'll take this one. Yes, you are allowed to submit more than 1, but don't wait and submit all 6 at the same time. Because that if you are then not successful in all 6 of them, then you might encounter that you have to pay to resubmit. So rather do 1 or 2 and see first if you're on the right track before you submit more. But yes, you are allowed to submit more than 1.
Thank you. If one is planning to write the first pre-registration exam, does it mean one must have submitted all CPDs by latest 10th of June?
Yes, Natalie, it does mean so that would be the last submission date. I just want to check again on those dates, but you would have had to have submitted all of your 6 CPDs by that stage. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm just on 2 screens. So the submission date is the 10th of June for your entries to be released on the 4th of July. And that would be the last release date before the examination. So yes, interns would have had to have submitted all 6 CPDs. And when the results are released on the 4th of July, they would have to be competent in at least 3 out of the 6 CPDs.
Thanks, Dan. Our last question. If I choose domain 6.3, formal training for pharmacy students, should I include their P numbers, etc.?
Okay, I'll take that one. No, I don't see that would be necessary. But what you would have to include is some sort of evidence which shows how this training that you are providing is part of their formal undergraduate education. So a part of their module descriptor, out of the yearbook or whatever. So you would need to have evidence of where it is, how does that relate to their formal training? So something about whichever module it is. You may find that some of the evidence you have, particularly if you're an academic intern, you might have some course evaluation documents where the part that you taught, you have an evaluation. Again, there it is the student as a student at the university, which is important, and not necessarily. Of course, to be a student, they would have P numbers, but I don't see that you'd have to, stress about getting their P numbers as well, because that doesn't add to it. But the fact that they are registered students is what makes this important, and that you're able to show how you were involved in a module that is actually part of their curriculum.
We've received 3 more questions. How much would it cost to resubmit CPDs if the need arises?
Oh, let's calculation. Okay. Okay, Natalie, maybe let's move on to the next one while I'm checking the fee. It is there published on the interns page, but I can check it. Maybe let's move on to the next one. We will come back to this one.
Thanks, Tabang. Question from YouTube. Romaite Sebelebele asks, should only one CPD be submitted per deadline, or can more than one be submitted? I think we've already answered this. More than one can be submitted.
Yes, more than one can be submitted.
Great. If I'm planning to do 3.6 and there was no medicine recall at that moment, but I'm well familiar with the process of how they go about with medicine recall and also referring to companies' SOPs.
Can I give a short answer?
Yes,
No.
please.
The short answer is no.
Yes, the short answer is no.
Because how on earth are you going to write the story of what you did if you didn't do anything? I think that's the short and the complete answer.
Yes.
I'm glad this question was asked because, again, it emphasizes it's about what you did, your actual activities, not about what you know about. Okay? So don't choose that competency standard. Look for another one, unless you're actually involved in the activity.
Yes, there will also be not sufficient evidence because behavioural statement C, and there's only 3 of them, is applying the guidelines for the recall. So if you can't apply it, then you won't be able to do it. So yes, you won't have sufficient evidence in any case.
Thank you very much. Tabang and Deanne, if you can just confirm what the fee for a resubmission of CPDs from the 10th entry on is?
Yes, it's 274 rands. It is published there on the interns page under fees. Okay, thank you, Natalie. Natalie?
Yes, Tabang, sorry, there's another question from YouTube. Anneke van Jaarsveld, if I received a prescription for compounding a mixture and no calculations were needed to complete the mixture, will the CPD still be valid without calculations?
Is that for 3.5?
It doesn't specify.
If we look at 3.5, which is the medicine compounding, there's only one behavioral statement which says applying pharmaceutical knowledge to the formulation and compounding of medicines. So I can't see that if no calculation was required, that the entry can be rejected. But this is an important one. It's also about applying pharmaceutical knowledge. So when you're doing all your steps and you're explaining what you did and how you compounded, if one of the steps might not need to have a step which requires calculation, but there's a number of other steps. So always make sure when you do all the other steps that you are explaining why you're doing things like that. Why are you mixing it like that? Why are you using this particular container, and apply it, bring in your pharmaceutical knowledge, bring in the theoretical knowledge to explain why you're doing things. But if you don't need a calculation, you don't need a calculation. Maybe wait for another one which does need a calculation. You're not only going to get one prescription that needs compounding.
Kuvanakala Splendor asks, is there at any point where the tutor and assessor can communicate, especially with a problematic CPD?
I guess it can be arranged. I'm not sure.
Deanne, you addressed that in your presentation.
I think I'm going to ask Tabang if she can respond.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Deanne. What is happening is, according to the guidelines, an assessor an intern or a tutor can consult with an assessor on a particular problematic CPD, only after the intern has attempted the same CPD twice and has failed it in both attempts. Then that's when they can request the office for a consultation meeting. Thank you.
The very last question. If the behavioral statements are odd in number and I have to cover 75%, should I cover 3 or 4 if there are 5 behavioral statements?
It's easy. You can't do 3.6 statements or 3.2 statements, so the answer will be 4. So round it up to the next whole number.
I think we should just add that the 75 is not set in stone. So it's more about the quality of the evidence. But if you only submit evidence for one behavioral statement, then it's not going to be sufficient, irrespective of the quality thereof. But yes, rather 4 if there's 5.
And I think we always say round it up to the next highest
Yes.
number, and then you know how many you need to submit for.
Yes.
That's the end of the questions, Tabang.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. Let me take this opportunity to thank you all for availing yourself to attend this workshop. I hope our interns and tutors, they have learned a lot, and I believe this is going to make their journey easy as they will be embarking on this CPD project. And I just want to thank you all for coming. Thanks, Prof. and Dr. Rianda, for taking the intern through, and my colleagues, Deanne, thank you so much for availing yourself to take them through the requirements. And I want to thank the team from Communications and Media for arranging the workshop for us and taking care of all other logistics. And lastly, I want to say to our interns, I just want to make you aware that this year we're not going to have any special release of results or something like that. It happened previously because our system was not, 100% okay, but it has been enhanced. Now everything is in order. So make sure that you observe the submission deadlines. Like I'm saying, everything is in order moving forward. So we're going to be more organized this year. And we promise we're not going to let any